team training. Got our team here on the call, and we're going to be walking through just a retrospective of a particular project we did. I'm going to show you the whole process of how we framed something, kind of what the client gave us initially, how we framed it, breadboarded it, made a task grid, and then kind of show you the end product. This is a ongoing project that is still got maybe 40% left to do, but we've actually delivered the prototype. We've delivered the first draft of everything to the client, and now they're just in the process this week and next of reviewing and giving feedback and fixing some bugs. So we have a really good pace on the project. I think like we framed it really well, and I just thought it would be good to do a top to bottom, like kind of look through all those steps of how a real project took place. And this was a 4-week project, so it's a decent size project, a little bit bigger than we're normally used to. So let's jump in. I may also share with Janata here as well, who's the lead developer on this project. And let's go through it. So I'm going to share my screen here. And we had, so this will be kind of our little agenda for today. This is for one of our clients building out a SaaS product for electricians. And so I'm just going to walk you through the actual Figma board so you can kind of see how this went down. Now, this is a client that actually gave us a 20 or 30 page PDF when we started working with them on everything they wanted. They had actually sat down in a document and built the entire project in a document, which is not doesn't normally happen. So when it came to this kind of project page, is what they were calling it, they wanted this one page where they could see, you know, a little bit about the project. Like they could, they have things where they have estimates, they have rooms, invoices, expenses, and orders, all related to a project, and they want to kind of see everything in one place. And so for the last few months, we've been building out things like an estimate tool. So they have a whole estimate tool, and you go to a page with a list of estimates, and all the estimates would be there for all projects. Then we had a room functionality, and you go to the rooms tab, and then there'd be a lot of, you know, place to edit the rooms. And so now they kind of wanted to kind of, this is sort of the final step where they wanted to look at it from the perspective of a single project, show me everything that's going on with this one project, and it's kind of tying the entire app together that way. So the way that it went down is we had this, and we had some initial little existing structure of how it works. So you can see we had tabs for each of these things, you know, inventory, products, estimates, and you could go to those tabs and look at specific table of the content there. So we made some notes here, and then Janata went in and built this pretty great first version of a breadboard. And so we arrived at our first shaping session with the client, or just with Janata and myself, and we opened this. And my first comment was, "Okay, this is great. Like, where is the framed document?" And so Janata, I'm not throwing him under the bus. He did a phenomenal job. He's like, "Oh yeah, I just went right into the breadboard." So I'm just showing you guys like the real talk of like how this went down, because I would say this is an extremely successful project, but we still like kind of getting our process dialed in, and it's pretty exciting because it feels so clear to just jump right into it and to jump into like the breadboarding. And so we've got all of this down here. So we kind of put a pause on that, and then him and I spent like a whole session, and we kind of came up with this problem outcome appetite. And you'll see, I'll delete this just for a second here so you can actually read it. This is sort of how we sketched it out. And so, you know, this is some of the problems. There's just one view. They needed one view for all the project data. Project data is scattered across different areas of the app. And then they want to basically have modules so they can show, you know, this. So this was a very, like, I would say give this like a D, or like maybe a 70, you know, ish score, 70%, like, well, maybe not. Let me say this is more like a 3 or 4 out of 10 score of like finished framed project. So we sat. This took probably an hour and a half. We knew it was going to be 4 weeks was the appetite, and things we said we weren't doing as a mobile app, which we had talked about with the client, and then specifically mentioned we weren't doing. So this is a great thing that keeps coming up. We tend to talk about a lot of things with the client, and then what's helpful with the not doing is to show them what we're doing above, in the outcome, but then go and if we talked about it, we typically put it on the not doing list. So they're super clear that we are not doing this thing, because sometimes it gets lost and we've had conversations about a certain thing, and it's kind of putting all the bad news up front. So this tends to be very helpful, because while we were talking about this, they also mentioned how they have people in the field and they want to have a mobile app, and and we just want to be really clear with, especially when you're working with clients or anyone for that matter, that they don't have this impression that like, oh well, we talked about mobile apps, so now that's just included. Because we had to be really, really concrete and not have anything vague in here when we said 4 weeks. So in a previous video, I showed you guys the Claude skill of the framing. So you can go back and watch that other one. So we took all of this and we brought it to the repository and went back and forth, and it asked a lot of different questions. And this is kind of how we ended up with a much, much better frame. So this is actually a screenshot from our dashboard. So I'm going to flip back here and kind of show you, sorry, it over here. So we got much more clear about it, and we have the way that it comes out here is working really nicely in our dashboard here. So we have a good formatting there, and then we said project managers cannot see what's happening with a project. All project-related data exists in the app, but it's organized by the type of data rather than by the project. To understand the status of a single project, users must go to 6 different dashboards, mentally filter each screen, cross-reference information across tabs and memory, and repeat this process multiple times a day, because everything they're doing for their jobs is related to projects. Data that should drive decisions sits unused, budget variances go unnoticed, tasks slip through the cracks, PMs waste a lot of time hunting instead of managing. So of course it's kind of summarizing this, but this clarity came because there's probably 3 or 4 hours worth of me and Jonato's time drawing squares and rectangles and in this, and then playing with the code, and then like looking back and forth. And we had to like build this mental structure in our brains of how this project was going to actually come about. And this, to me, what it really came down to was we've been working on this project for almost a year with them. And this was sort of the cherry on top. Like this was actually like, we sort of repositioned this whole project as a much bigger deal. It wasn't like, oh, and here's another project. We're just going to make a dashboard for projects. It actually kind of positioned it in our minds as like, hey, you have to do this. This is the missing piece that's going to bring all the other pieces together. And it really, just from like a helping cast a vision for the client as well, it changed how we presented it to the client, because we had sort of mentally built this frame in our minds of how important this project actually was. And then what was great is when we handed this frame to the Claude skill and we reviewed it against the code, it asked us lots and lots of questions. And then we went in a few different iterations to this. And then we actually sat and kind of reworded a few things just to be extra clear. So it's just this, like, it comes out and looks so simple and clear. And even when I started talking about this project at the beginning of this video, like, you probably didn't know exactly what it was, but now when you start to read this finished frame, it's probably like, oh yeah, no, that's exactly, it feels so much more concrete. And so here's some of the outcome statements. We just said, we want to be able to see the health of a project quickly, under 30 seconds. You could glance at a dashboard and kind of see, are we on track? Are we over? Are we behind schedule? Budget status is visible. Task progress is visible. Critical information is not hidden. This is something we talked over and over about, because little things get a life in projects. I'll go all the way back here. This little mock-up that the project manager on the client side designed in Excel to show how it works, and everything that they wanted was in tabs, and they kept using this word tabs everywhere. And they would say, they mentioned it in their requirements doc. They had the mock-up with tabs, and we just built it kind of with a tab idea in the first initial plan. We had, estimates and room tab, like, and then we had, let's see, what other tabs did we have? But you get the idea, inventory, order tab. So we just threw this word tab in everywhere, and it kind of got a life. And that's kind of scary when you're building out the frame of a project, because we did not use the word tabs anywhere, because once we got into it, the more we got into it, we're like, you're going to have something on the third tab on the fourth row down that's pretty important, and you're not going to see it because it's buried 3 clicks away to get to that. And we just assumed, but it took us 4 or 5 hours of being into just the framing and the shaping to finally like pull that piece out of it. I mean, you can see here we actually put tabs in our initial frame, and it's just one word, but it all of a sudden create this like little mental model of like, no, they asked for tabs, we have to, obviously we have to build tabs. And so it took us like getting into it to really push the to get clear on it, that hey, one of the big deals here is we're trying to make this one page so you don't miss things. And if we like basically go back to tabs, ironically we're kind of back to like a similar problem as before, where we had all these tabs, right? Like we had tabs to get to these different things that were part related to the project. And we just sort of moved those tabs from a vertical list to like a horizontal list and filter them by the project. So it's like, it is a very logical, it's one way to do it. It's just not the best way to do it. Um, and so when we really pressed into it, it was all about this visibility thing and like project health being scannable and having all the data in kind of one location. And we used this to present this to the client, and once they kind of saw it, they got a vision for it, and we never went back on the tab idea again. Um, Again, look how long the out of bounds list is. Uh, these all got surfaced by the Cloud skill after our conversation with it and looking at the code. Um, we wanted to be really clear about like, hey, this is really just a view to get to other places of the app. We're not going to have like the full, experience of building out an estimate in this little project dashboard thing. You're going to basically say, I want to make a new estimate, and you're going to go estimate section now and reuse existing pages. So we got really clear, so the clients knew exactly what we were um, going after. One of the other things we said, um, changes to there's a list of projects that happen, and I'm actually just going to jump into it here. So kind of sneak peek there. There's a list of projects here where it just lists out all the projects, and that is something we just said, hey, we're going to leave that as is. Just the list is still there, but once you click into the project, that's when this new view takes over. So we were able to talk through each of these bullet points. Um, and this is a bit of an exercise. We do talk through each of these with the client to explain that they really understand what they're not getting. Because so often they're going to be like, oh, but we really wanted notifications in there, or we wanted this other thing. And then, potentially that affects what we can and can't do. So this is good to just write it out, be extremely clear. Um, and there was some discussion about whether they could upload documents. I think we did end up allowing them to do this at the end. And there was one thing in here, I don't think we actually mentioned it, but we were pretty clear that like we would come up with this view of the dashboard, and that would be the view. It's not customizable. You can't save things. That was one thing that came up. I don't know if we actually wrote it out here specifically, but it was something we definitely told them verbally on some calls that's like totally out of scope. Um, so uh, we went through that, and then the way that our system works is this project gets approved, and then the frame actually gets locked down, so we can't edit it anymore. Then Janata built out a whole task grid. So we had a bunch of different things here. I know we broke the rule a little bit because we have a few more than 9, but this is sort of the different sections. Each component has its own little list of things to do. And we had some extra stuff. We actually had time to go in and make this customizable drag and drop functionality. And so the way that the project goes, if I can kind of go back to my list here, make sure I don't miss anything. We went through this initial board, we framed it, we then did here. This was with the Claude skill that happened here. Then we did the task grid and jumped into it, and this all happened kind of within like maybe a span of a week to 10 days in January. And then we were able to kick off and actually start, kind of beginning of February. And looking at the actual time list here, you can see that's kind of what happened. We had a start date of the 3rd of February, and the first like block of hours started coming in around here. And there's a bunch of pre-work that got done. I don't know if we really tracked it to this project or not. But that all sort of happened on the other side of this. So we kind of had sign off right from the beginning of it. And you can see like we have our little log here, so you can see it got approved on the 3rd. Was sort of our first date where he said, "Yes, this is confirmed." Um, so we went through the project here. We did do a little mock-up in V0. Oops. In V0 here, this was helpful to show the client. When they saw this, they kind of got the vision for it. This idea of like having sections, and I think this says six version 6. I think there was more like 10 or 15 of these versions, but once we kind of had the idea for how um, this was going to work, we had like these little sections that would be laid out um, in sort of like a grid or like a what's it called? Like not a mosaic, but like the a bento box layout. These are like popular. We showed this to them, and then we could show like how we could isolate numbers and see like charts and all this stuff. They got very excited about it, and this was very useful to submit alongside the frame to get that approval. It got them really excited about the project. And then where we landed was, I'll jump into this test project here, is something like this. And we have all the, different numbers at the top. We have a number of different sections here. And when you go into an estimate, for example, it pulls up these little cards and they can kind of get to more detailed information from inside here. So if you go to estimates and they hit new estimate, they can fill out a few things and then they get kicked into the new estimate flow, which was already existing in the app. Um, and so forth. They have an activity. You can see like what things have been done. This is like a whole little list of things. This was actually, I think, out of scope, but once we were in here, it was just something that Janata made, and it's super cool because you can see like what happened with the project yesterday, what's happening today, little summary of everything, and the clients absolutely love that. Um, Seeing each room, so like this project has like a bathroom, bathroom 2, bedroom 1, bedroom 2, and you can click into a room here and see what's going on, with this hypothetical little project here. So pretty cool. And the clients love this. And then of course because we're sort of like ahead of schedule. Let me just look at this. So we're kind of sitting here on the 19th is when we're recording this. We've really delivered most of the functionality, and we still have like a solid week or two to go. So even with that, we were able to build out this little cool functionality where you can hit the edit button and you can actually move these blocks around and then save um, your new view for that users of kind of how you want to see a project. So that was just an incredible cool feature there that just made it like a even better for them. So we showed it the client here in the timeline. We showed them on the 16th, I believe, or the 17th, I think is the Tuesday. Demoed it. They actually reviewed it for 2 days, and they just sent us like a whole list of like items that they noticed either were bugs or things that are being presented as a bug, but they're kind of like a small feature. We know what those look like. Um, and again, with the margin, we have 2 full weeks to go and make this look really great. One thing that we've just been fighting for, like because this is a 4-week project, we 100% have to be done with this thing on the 20th. This means they've gone through like 2 or 3 rounds of fixes on it. What we don't want to do is we kind of deliver this first version to the client like the last few days. They have a day or two to look at it, and then really what happens is we end up with this like massive list of reactive work in March for this project, and now we're kind of cleaning up March for stuff that should have happened, in February. And so these are, that we want to kind of tighten up. And we're doing a lot of things to make sure that this was a very clear project right up front. And I think we cut back a ton of cost with this because we massively simplified the output here, where we just said, let's do everything on one screen. And we didn't have all these tabs to worry about. And we can have these little modals that pop up. It just kind of made everything smaller because we didn't have to like design as much for these little modals versus an entire tab that would take up the entire screen. So little changes, but actually made like a huge difference to the project here. So yeah, very cool. Let me see if I had anything else. Yeah, we said we delivered. And we're just wrapping up the bug fixes here. So um, any questions, comments from the team? I'd love to like if you guys have questions, Luchan or Chris or Janata, if you want to comment on anything, you were obviously involved heavily. Let's like do a little bit of discussion about this or the process and go from there.
Yeah, sure. I just adding my 2 cents to the conversation. I believe like we have been discussing this idea a lot of having on one side that uphill view where we do the framing, we do the shaping, and a lot of this is the human side of the work, and basically to better understand the customer and how to present this in a better way for them. And I think this process we are getting better at it each day. But yeah, this is actually what I'm looking now, Bruce. But he has the fig jam open. I think he'll share the screen. But I think we are getting, yeah, exactly this one. Like we are getting better each day at the first part, so that the second part becomes the more I want to use the word like the more delightful as possible, because I think working with AI can be very frustrating in the sense of like sometimes if you are hitting your head against the wall, like why don't you do what I want, and stuff like that. We can really easily enter into this mode. But I think the whole first part really helps in terms of breaking it down for the agentic workflow. And especially for this project, and I think this project had one very interesting characteristic, that we had many components and none of them were related. So basically, the bulk of the work was done in parallel, meaning I broke the project down into small components, meaning the estimates component, the orders component, and each component had its own .md plan for me to implement. But when I triggered the implementation, I triggered for all plans simultaneously, meaning that all agents were working on the feature. Like I had one agent for each component work on the feature simultaneously. And since the features were not interceding with each other, the whole all of the agents ran smoothly, so I could test by the end of the process. Of course, this was not like perfect, and a lot of agents got stuck in some points, but this talks a lot about this changing this view where we are not exactly maintaining the code directly, but we maintain the agents that maintain the code, and we need these agents to be as well directed and also have access as the tools they need. So one example, if you allow one agent to be able to open your Chrome, screenshot the page it's doing, and go back to the workboard, let's say, we increase our chances of by the end of the work of this agent that he will have built a interface that is nice, because we added the capacity for this agent to screenshot its own work and look at it and evaluate. So I think there's a lot of progress to be made in the sense of thinking, how do I make this agent as capable as possible, but also how do I implement as much guardrails as possible so this agent works like a train. It's working on this. It's a locomotive. Like we have the trails and it's working on the right trails. And our function as a developer now is to more or less to maintain the trails and maintain the train, keep it running and keep it flowing smoothly, and especially don't let it run over the city. So you don't want for, because this is a very specific train that can also make some form of decision making and build itself. So you don't want this to happen. Like you don't want it to, you don't want one agent working on top of the other and stuff
Yeah,
like that. So yeah, I think more or less this is a comprehensive view of like what was the flow of
yeah,
development.
that's good. I think, and also, I mean, technically, there's some things you can get into. Like we've used Git like work trees as well to be in the same branch, and then have like each agent has its own tree essentially, and then you kind of bring it all back together.
Exactly.
There's some we can get into that. There's some cool things there. I mean, what's also worth saying in this retrospective thing is that um, looking at the frame here and looking at kind of the finished product, even this was like this type of view was obviously like this type of project made for agentic coding.
Yeah,
There's very other than this whole like the reordering, there's some customization there, but it's referencing concepts that are already in the code, and so
exactly.
it can go and reference how project looks, how like order stats, these are things that you can go and it already has concepts for this in the app. So it is a great example of how we could use it. Obviously, I have other projects working on with Greg and other people this week that are just so complicated, and there's so much new content and there's so much new concepts that you have to put together. But this is a good example. So I just want to mention that, not to say like, oh well, no wonder we're ahead of schedule and it's so easy because this is an easy project. It kind of became easy after a lot of like thinking and diving into it and putting a lot of thought into the finished product, versus just like jumping in and having Claude sort of put the structure together. It was easy for Claude, like I said, to execute on these individual components and tasks. Would you say, Janata, that was kind of maybe broken up by the slices here? Is that kind of how you broken up those?
Exactly. Basically, each agent was working on one slice. I think just the estimates and I think the inventory component, I had to break it down into more agents for it to work properly, because there were like more nuanced stuff for this part. But all the other ones were one agent for each. And yeah, I think like this not all projects will not be able to tackle all projects this way. That's the that's the truth. But one thing that goes without saying is like, one thing that really helped was like, previously all the components we went through a process of cleaning all the components from the reminiscent Flutter flow code. So components that were like 10,000 lines of code got down to like break down to smaller components of a few hundreds, and this really helped. Like the model really starts to get dumb after 40% of context used. So if we want to be efficient as possible with the agents, in my view, we want to keep always the working memory under like 40 or 60 or 5 or 50 or 60% of the context window. In my view, especially for Claude Codex, I feel it's a little bit better and doesn't get so slow as we grow context, but Claude can really start to mess up if we grow context. At least that's what I experience. So if we can break this down into things that agent can use, like just this specific 40%, and then we have a new, that's also one thing interesting. You use up to the 40% of context, and then you ask the model for it to generate a prompt for you to continue the work in a cleaned context window. This way you are always working with this very amount of working memory, let's say, and the model can be more specific. So yeah,
that's a good insight, Janata. I was looking at something called Claude Mem, which helps have helps Claude have memory across different sessions. So it claims to use 95% fewer tokens, but I like your approach because it's very proactive, right, in managing both context and usage. Did you say you use context? So sorry, I missed some of the workflow. Did you use context? Sorry, can you go through a workflow again, like which ones you used at what time?
Okay, so right now my workflow is basically I'm mostly using warp.dev as my IDE, which is basically a terminal agent slash agent. It's a terminal that's focused on running the CLIs that run like Call the Code or Codex or Gemini or any other. So it's one terminal to rule them all, let's say. So I have in one terminal, I'm using like Gemini, Codex, and Claude. My view, and this changed like from 4.5 to 4.6 in the Opus version. Like Claude just released the Opus 4.6, and in the same day, OpenAI released Codex 5.3. And what they did, basically, Codex now is more similar to Claude Code, and Claude Code is more similar to Codex in these new versions. So basically, what they did is they are becoming closer to each other. But on the older versions, like the 4.5 and 5.2 for Codex, I would say that Claude is better at like managing multiple stuff and like managing the agents and like deciding which tasks are going to do what. But the Codex is like this really good technical partner that can really have work lift and refactor, and like it's not so warm and not so fast, but it's also very precise. It's like the Claude Code in personality terms, I would say, is more similar to a vibe coder, and the Codex is more similar to a very narrowed specialist and does the bulk of the work. But this line is getting crossed as the models evolve, because in the end, I think they will all converge into something very similar, and this will become a commodity in the sense of doesn't matter if we're using like one or the other. I believe, I don't know when, but I believe that's where we are heading in the sense of like commoditization of this tool.
So we just, because we're going to go down, like we could spend hours on the process here. I do want to do like some more training specifically on that and have Jonathan like walk through what he's doing. He's got some cool stuff.
Yes,
so
please.
For the frame, like of this thing, anything Alex, maybe on the process of the project. I think like the agentic piece is good, and we're basically breaking up like each slice to kind of run it simultaneously. And I've kind of like treated, even if you don't run, so if you're like, oh wow, so running multiple parallel agents all at once sounds intimidating. If you kind of break things up by like the slices, if you take each one of these and kind of run that, to me is like a work session. Like you can pretty much rip through an entire slice in 1, 2 or 3 hour session and just kind of work through that. It goes very, very quickly. So where, this is technically a 4-week project, but it's a number of, sort of deep work sessions to get each one done. And some of them will go very, very quickly. And this is a great case because you kind of had this one container of a component, and then you had lots of different types of components that were all very easily able to reference the code itself. So that kind of makes good sense to have like multiple running at the same time. I have done like 2 or 3 running at the same time if you're working on different parts of the app, because a lot of the time, if you guys have found that you're doing this coding, you're just sitting waiting for like 2 or 3 minutes to like it to crank through a bunch of stuff, and you get bored. So you start clicking through the app and you're like, oh, why is this bug still happening? And so you kind of go on like another rabbit trail. At least when I'm working on the dashboard, that's constantly how I do it. So I ended up like making a few like smaller tasks kind of around while the main task is working.
Exactly.
Or the other thing you can do is put it in plan mode. So you could have 2 or 3 plan mode on running together. So you're like planning different things all together, and then it's building the execution plan, and then you just kind of like execute. If you want to be safe, you can like build all the plans at the same time, and then kind of just build the first one, get it done, commit that code, build the second, commit. So you kind of like queue them all up and then just like fire away. You can get a lot of work done very quickly. So I'm giving you sort of like some baby steps to get it to maybe what Jonathan was saying, if that sounds insane, but there we go. Yeah, Lucien says he wants when he goes. Same.
Yeah, but that's also a point. Like when I'm working in this way, like with like doing parallel work with agents, I can work less time. You become a lot more tired. It's crazy, like because you have to keep in mind that okay, you left that agent in one point and that agent on the other. You can, of course, look at the chat and see what's going on, but in general, you have expanded how much you need to keep in mind your house of mental models to keep things running. So I think this is more taxing for the brain, but I think in general it's very fun. Like I mean, it's very fun because like it's like Bruce said, like you basically. I like this idea of like if I'm working on something, I don't want to have downtime while I'm working at it. So if I can like have uh, tweak my workflow a bit to become easier for me to work with these multiple agents, I think this is kind of a bit of how the future of our work will be developing the next few months and years and so
100%.
yeah.
You can only scroll on X that much between like waiting for it to process.
Yeah,
That's
that's
fair though. Like the thing I saw on X, like exactly about this. Like someone like put a Claude plugin that like when Claude like starts working on something, or like when it finishes a thing or it requires input, it makes like a sound effect, and they put like the effects from the peons from Warcraft. You know, work complete.
perfect. That's perfect.
That's good.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. The other thing with this is like this is fresh because I was shaping and doing all this process again with Greg earlier this week, and so one thing is that we've also I told him yesterday is like I don't think anyone here is doing any of this process solo. So like the framing, you know, we're getting stuff from the client, we're framing stuff, we're coming back doing like an internal team um, you know, review. Then we're going kind of like a second phase at the breadboard. Then we do another thing. And we stick it through Claude. Then we're kind of doing it all together. And I think I think it was Jason Fried made a great comment. Is like the reason you need a second person is because you need someone to kind of like pull on the thought process and kind of argue with you a little bit. Because that's the one thing like AI is not going to really do. They're going to be like, you're absolutely right. Like you're phenomenal. Like it's going to keep just telling you that you're doing a great job. Whereas, as humans, we kind of keep this context window of like, you know, and in one with Greg, like Janata spent way more time in the XDeck code. Greg has spent more time in this other project, and I was kind of coming in just to help put the system together. So there was like these little nuances that you know about once you're kind of familiar with the code itself, that when you start to frame it or think of how this new thing's going to fit in, you know, you just don't have that context. So there's a good like kind of you know, pull and tug of war going on between like two different thoughts, and then you throw AI in there to like basically just make sure we're keeping to the process is really great. So those little framing skills would be great. I think we're gonna make a new shape up task grid skill as well that can take that, maybe can like use the Innovo dashboard API and just load them into the project for us would be great, and then read them out of there when they're ready. That'd be really easy. To help keep us like on task with this, when you go into a new project, this one's a little bit done after the fact, but there'll be a short list of things in a slice called admin and strategy. So just random things that we need to do here. We need to email the client, and we need to get approval from the budget, and we need to make sure we build the task grid. This is just like help keep us a little checklist on kind of the rest of the project. So you'll see this little slice show up on all new projects. If a project was made before last week, it doesn't have it, but you can easily make one. But now when we start a new project, there'll be this little like admin strategy slice that gets added automatically. And there'll be I don't think it follows exactly this, but it's something similar to this where, you know, we will make sure like all the things are connected. The framing doc is set. We've, you know, built out the task grid, actually get approval on the budget, things like that. Just little hit list. If we think of something like, oh, I got to email the client and ask them that question, and you want to track it somewhere, this is a great little spot to keep it there. Or I need to remember to actually send a video review of where we're at in this process. That's also super helpful. So that'll be in there, and we'll continue to change that checklist as we go through it. I will say also on the feedback of this task grid from a client standpoint, it looks like there's a lot going on. This is about the easiest way I've ever seen in the last 16 years of doing development projects to show a client what's going on, because you can see like major sections of the project being completed, and with a little bit of percentage up here. Anyone could look at this and kind of look at the big headlines and kind of skim it and kind of get a sense of where we're at. I just haven't seen like any other Kanban board or anything else match this. So this would be something to just make sure we're keeping up with at the end of each session. For my workflow, I have this up and VS Code, and I just constantly toggling between them. And as I think of tasks, I'm adding them, I'm marking them complete, and I keep it kind of updated live. So as soon as we get the MCP working from Claude, then you can just have it update the tasks for you. But just don't throw these all in the task and then go off and do the project and come back, because there's a reason there's like rewrite stuff down because we just assume that we're not going to remember things. Same thing, you know, I'm just trying to steal all the best practices. Some good habits I learned getting my pilot's license is that no one, even if you've been flying for like 2 decades, you still have your little checklist, because people just forget stuff. And the way you make sure you're absolutely perfect every time and don't miss things is just to assume that you're not going to remember these things and keep them all in your head. So that's a great way to do that. So any other questions, thoughts? I know we'll wrap up in a minute here.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, outstanding work. Yeah, awesome. Well done.
Well done. Yep.
Sweet. I think a couple takeaways for us is just like for the team, like keeping trying to get to like something that we can demo or put in the client's hands around the 50 to 60% mark, 70% mark of the budget. Much easier, I know, when there's like a 4-week budget than if you got like a 1-week project and you're 2 days in, you're trying to show the client something. That I know that's hard. But at least keeping like the updates flowing, at least letting them see stuff early on. One great trick we did with this project was actually prototype the front end and get them to see it before we hooked up the back end. Of course, like those types of little tricks are great. They can see it in their app. They can see how little things connect. And then we spend another step just like making stuff functional, because we don't want to go too far down. So just those regular quick updates is very helpful. It gives clients peace of mind, because we're in it and we're seeing everything happen so fast. We get excited. So capture some of that excitement, like send it on over to the client. Like if you got a little cool screenshot to show, that's always great. You can drop it in Notion or drop it in Slack, whatever. And those go a long way. It just keeps the excitement level up and the focus. And as you're making progress, there's always like probably something you could show for that. So all good stuff. And we'll figure out a good there's a couple other trainings we want to do in the future. One was like maybe a longer, maybe an hour or 2 session where we do like go from 0 to 1 of setting up an entire new project, just starting something from scratch. So like if you wanted to go do a side project, how would you go like from a concept to quickly shaping something up, to get it deployed? Where do you host it? How do you set up Stripe to get billing? Just there's something you can do in like an hour or 2 to just get like the bones of something up, and and then you can go and fill out marketing, and you can fill out all the features and all the other stuff. But there's kind of like getting the framework of something up. I think we could help out with that in like a 1 to 2 hour live build session. And maybe if you guys have projects, we can do those alongside us and kind of do kind of a real-time build of something. And then I've been sort of watching a lot of what Janata is doing, and we'll kind of show some things on the process side. And then we've got some cool tools potentially coming to where you guys could maybe use some really cool tech stuff that he's been building somewhere between all these other projects he's doing. I don't know when he had time for that, but so good stuff. Yeah. Awesome, guys. I'm gonna end the stream and we can